In the winter of 1910, a blacksmith from Waterville, Maine, walked into a lawyer's office in San Francisco. His name was Alvin Orlando Lombard, and he held a patent for a continuous track system that he had tested on Thanksgiving Day, 1900. Lombard arrived 3 years before a man named Benjamin Holt ever bolted a wooden plank to a chain. Lombard had sold Holt the rights to his patent for $60,000. In return, Holt had promised to respect Lombard's territory in the northern lumber country. But the contract was never signed. The money stopped coming. Holt's machines were showing up everywhere, from California wheat fields to government construction projects, built on the same principle Lombard had invented first. When Lombard finally confronted a lawyer named Henry Montgomery about the situation, his words were recorded for posterity. He said, "By God, young man, I am glad to see you. If God Almighty could charter me to kill a man, I would get on the train and go to California and kill old Ben Holt." But the man Lombard wanted to kill had already set in motion something far bigger than either of them understood. A chain reaction that would create the military tank, the bulldozer, and a company now worth over $60 billion. This is the story of how wooden planks, bolted to a steam engine on Thanksgiving Day, 1904, changed construction forever, and how more than a century of failed attempts before that day explain why it almost never happened at all. If you are interested in construction history, like and subscribe to follow this series. To understand why Benjamin Holt risked everything on a pair of wooden tracks, we need to understand the land that forced his hand. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta stretches across 250 square miles of central California. In the early 1900s, it was some of the richest farmland on Earth. Black peat soil dozens of feet deep, built up over thousands of years of decomposing marsh grass. The problem was that this soil had the consistency of a wet sponge. A man walking across it would sink to his knees. A horse pulling a plow would sink to its belly, and a 50,000-pound Holt steam tractor would sink to its axles and stay there. Benjamin Holt had tried everything. His solution before tracks was almost comically wrong. He mounted 3 drive wheels per side, each 6 feet wide and 7.5 feet tall. The front steering wheel was replaced with a 10-foot wide wooden barrel. The resulting machine was 46 feet across. It could not pass through a farm gate. It could not cross a bridge. It could not turn at the end of a field row. And it still sank. He tried laying temporary plank roads ahead of the tractor. Too slow, too expensive. The Delta's farmers were desperate. Farm Implement News reported in May of 1905 that the Roberts Island tract had been useless for crop raising for several years because no way was found to plow it. The land was immensely fertile. If anyone could figure out how to get a machine onto it. But here is what almost nobody knows. Benjamin Holt was not even close to the first person to try building a machine that carried its own road beneath it. The earliest known design for a continuous track dates to 1713, when a Frenchman named Monsieur d'Ermont in Paris sketched a goat-pulled cart rolling on a belt of 26 small rollers in what appears to be one of the oldest technical drawings in the French engineering archives. It was never built. In 1825, Sir George Coulee, the Yorkshire inventor known as the father of aeronautics for building the first human carrying glider, patented what he called a universal railway. He published a continuous belt track system for soft terrain, with woodcut illustrations in the Mechanics magazine in London. His experiments on the muddy fields of his Brompton Hall estate showed doubled traction over wheels on mud and sand. But he had no provision for steering. The machine could go straight, and that was it. In 1837, a member of Parliament named John Heathcote, who had made his fortune inventing lace-making machines in the textile mills of Tiverton, Devon, built what may have been the first tracked vehicle ever constructed and operated. His steam plow weighed 30 tons and ran on 2 continuous tracks of 7-foot wooden sections bolted to iron bands, powered by a coal-fired boiler belching smoke across the English moorland. He had invested £12,000, roughly $1.5 million in today's money. On April 20, 1837, it was demonstrated at Red Moss, a peat bog near Bolton-le-Moors, in the industrial north of England. It worked, briefly. Then it sank into the wet English bog and was abandoned. £12,000 gone into the mud. The most remarkable forgotten inventor may be Fyodor Abramovich Blinov, a freed Russian serf from the Saratov region along the Volga River. Self-taught in the blacksmith workshops and grain mills of rural Russia, Blinov received a patent on September 20, 1879, for a wagon moved on endless rails. Between 1881 and 1888, working in a small workshop in Saratov, he built a steam-powered tracked vehicle with 2 separate steam engines, one for each track, enabling differential steering. That is the exact principle used by every modern tracked vehicle and every military tank on Earth today. He demonstrated it publicly on the dusty roads outside Saratov in 1889 and at the great Nizhny Novgorod Industrial Fair on the Volga in 1897. No commercial buyer ever materialized. And then there was Warren P. Miller of Marysville, California, a small town in the Sacramento Valley, who holds United States Patent 23,853, granted May 3, 1859. Miller demonstrated a tracked steam plow at the 1858 California State Fair in Sacramento, winning a cash prize and a gold medal in front of crowds of Gold Rush-era farmers and merchants. An engineering review later noted that his traction system was the same system Lombard patented over 40 years later. Only one was built. Miller could not find financing in the young state of California, and the machine was forgotten. More than 100 patents, more than a century of attempts, and not one of them created a commercial industry. The question is why? The answer begins in the frozen lumber country of northern Maine. Alvin Orlando Lombard was born in 1856 in Springfield, Maine, deep in the forested hill country of the northern Appalachians. A self-taught mechanic who ran a blacksmith shop on the main street of Waterville, Maine, Lombard spent his days repairing farm tools and logging equipment. In 1899, lumberman E.J. Lawrence challenged him to build a machine that could haul logs over frozen roads without horses. According to the historical record, Lombard produced drawings and a working model within 24 hours, sketching them during a train trip. His first prototype, nicknamed Mary Ann, had a problem. It initially just hopped up and down in place before modifications got it moving forward. His patent, United States Patent 674,737, was filed November 9, 1900, and granted May 21, 1901. His first working prototype ran on Thanksgiving Day, 1900, exactly 4 years before Holt's test, and on the same holiday. The Lombard steam log hauler was a half-track machine built for the frozen logging roads of the Maine and New Hampshire wilderness. It had continuous tracks at the rear and was steered by a team of horses at the front. Later, the horses were replaced by skis and a hand wheel. The machines weighed between 10 and 30 tons, produced 75 to 90 horsepower from coal-fired boilers, and could pull up to 300 tons of lumber on sled trains through deep snow and ice. The record run was 24 sleds loaded with timber, with a total train length of 1,650 feet, nearly a third of a mile of lumber rolling through the frozen pine forests. Berlin Mills Company estimated each hauler replaced 60 horses. Between 1901 and 1917, 83 steam log haulers were built. 5 were sold in the first 4 years. Some went to Michigan and Wisconsin, 3 were shipped to Russia. Phoenix Manufacturing Company in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, built additional machines under license called centipedes, paying Lombard $1,000 in royalty for each machine. The working conditions were brutal and occasionally absurd. The steersman sat at the front, completely exposed to temperatures reaching minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, while sparks from the boiler stack routinely set his clothing on fire. Some steersmen bought fire-resistant leather gear just to survive the shift. The machines had no brakes beyond reversing the engines. On downhill routes, crews spread hay on the road surface for friction. But hungry deer sometimes ate the hay before the train arrived. At a demonstration in Colebrook, New Hampshire, in 1904, Lombard hitched his machine to 40,000 board feet of lumber and ran it through town. He later recalled that hundreds of people lined the road, and that ministers had to shut down the churches on Sunday because nobody was coming to services. They were all watching the log hauler. A lumberman at the demonstration wrote a $5,000 check on the spot. 3 haulers were even shipped to Russia for winter logging operations. But for all their success in the Maine woods, Lombard's machines had a fundamental limitation. The continuous track needed someone who could take it from the Maine woods to the wider world. That someone was already building wagon wheels in Stockton, California. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of the machines that built the modern world. Benjamin Leroy Holt was born January 1, 1849, in Concord, New Hampshire. He was the youngest of 4 brothers and one of 11 siblings. His father ran a sawmill and lumber business. Benjamin worked the family sawmill from age 14. In 1883, after both parents had died, he relocated to California and co-founded the Stockton Wheel Company with his brother Charles, investing $65,000 in a factory. They chose Stockton for its warm, dry climate, ideal for drying wood, and its river access. The company produced 6,000 wagon wheels and 5,000 carriage bodies in its first year, growing to 200 employees by 1897. By 1892, the firm was renamed the Holt Manufacturing Company. Holt built his first steam traction engine, nicknamed Old Betsy, in 1890. It was 24 feet long and weighed approximately 48,000 pounds. Between 1890 and 1904, Holt manufactured roughly 130 wheeled steam-powered tractors. Every one of them sank in Delta peat. The test of Holt Junior Road Engine number 77 took place on Thursday, November 24, 1904, Thanksgiving Day, in the spongy peat soil beside Mormon Slough, just outside Stockton. The machine's rear wheels had been replaced with a pair of tracks 9 feet long by 2 feet wide. Wooden 2x4 redwood slats were bolted to endless link chains and driven by sprockets. A conventional front tiller wheel provided steering. The 40-horsepower crawler pulled 4 two-bottom plows, plowing 2 inches deeper than a larger 60-horsepower. Holt wheeled steamer that could only manage 3 plows. Speed was 2 to 3 miles per hour over virgin Delta land. Benjamin's nephew, C. Parker Holt, recalled that the first Caterpillar wallowed around so successfully in the soft mud of Mormon Slough that it was sent down to the Holt Ranch on Roberts Island, where it operated steadily for an entire winter. But that first success was just the beginning of a long and difficult development. Between November 1904 and late 1906, Holt fabricated 6 steam-powered track-type prototypes. All 6 had serious problems. Their 7th track design became the first production model, sold in late 1906 for $5,500 each. That is roughly $175,000 in today's money. The early production tracks measured 30 inches high by 42 inches wide by 9 feet long per side, with 3 by 4 inch redwood slat shoes. The name Caterpillar came from company photographer Charlie Clements, who watched the tracks undulate between the drive sprocket and the front idler wheel during a March 1905 field visit, and said the machine crawled like a caterpillar. Benjamin Holt did not like the name. Other options considered included mud turtles, railroad wheel, and treadmill. His nephew Pliny and others in the family persuaded him. The name did not appear in print until the Stockton Daily Evening Record on September 25, 1908. It was not placed on a tractor until 1909, and it was not registered as a trademark until August 2, 1910. While Holt was developing his tracks in California, an English engineer named David Roberts was solving the same problem 3,000 miles away in the flat agricultural country of eastern England. Roberts was chief engineer at Richard Hornsby and Sons, whose factory in Grantham, Lincolnshire, had been producing agricultural steam engines and threshing machines since the 1820s. His chain track design, patented July 23, 1904, with British patent 16,345, introduced something Holt's system lacked entirely: differential steering through the tracks alone, eliminating the front tiller wheel. This is the steering principle used by every modern tank and crawler bulldozer on Earth. The British War Office tested Roberts' machine repeatedly on the military parade grounds of southern England. In May of 1908, it was demonstrated before King Edward VII and the Prince of Wales at the Aldershot military camp in Hampshire. In 1908 and 09, a 75-horsepower Mercedes engine mounted on Hornsby tracks hit 25 miles per hour, racing across the wet sand at Skegness Beach on the Lincolnshire coast, a tracked vehicle speed record that was not surpassed until World War II. Major Donahue of the War Office suggested Roberts add armor and guns to create a self-propelled weapon. Roberts declined, a decision he later expressed deep regret over. A British Army report dismissed the entire concept, writing that the machine was impossible in a column with other troops and that its noise and smell were abominable. During testing before shipment to the Yukon, a 25-ton Hornsby machine reportedly demolished a house by accident. That one civilian sale went to the Northern Light Power and Coal Company for hauling coal in Canada's far north. The 25-ton, 80-horsepower Hornsby operated for 15 years in the Yukon, in temperatures reaching minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The sole surviving remains, just the tracked chassis stripped by loggers, reportedly sit on northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia. In 1908, Hornsby produced what may have been one of the first industrial commercial films ever made, shown at the Empire Theatre in Leicester Square, London, in 8 languages, to promote the chain track system to international buyers. It did not work. The military was not interested. Civilian buyers saw no need for it. Only one civilian Hornsby was ever sold, and then, in early 1914, Hornsby sold all of its crawler track patents to Holt Manufacturing for just £4,000, about $20,000. Within 12 months, the same British War Office that had rejected the Hornsby ordered 442 Holt Caterpillar tractors. They were built under license by Ruston of Lincoln, a factory located near Hornsby's own works. Britain had to buy back American-made machines built on patents created by its own countrymen. But before the tracks went to war, they went to court. Like and subscribe to follow the story. Daniel Best was born March 20, 1838, in Tuscarawas, County, Ohio, in the rolling farmland south of Canton. He joined a covered wagon train heading west in 1859 as an ox tender and sharpshooter, crossing the Great Plains and the Sierra Nevada mountains. He worked California gold mines and sawmills, lost the first 3 fingers of his left hand in a sawmill accident, and later said the injury made him begin to use his head instead. He received 42 patents over 43 years and founded the Best Manufacturing Company in San Leandro, California, on the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay. In 1905, Best sued Holt for patent infringement. 3 years of legal warfare followed before Daniel Best sold 2/3 of his company to Holt for $325,000 in 1908. His son, Clarence Leo Best, known as CL, received 1/3 of the stock before the sale. CL was given a management position at Holt's Stockton plant, but the Holt brothers rejected most of his ideas. He left after less than 2 years. In 1910, C.L. Best founded the C.L. Best Gas Traction Engine Company in Elmhurst, California, near Oakland. His innovations outpaced Holt's across the board. Removable cylinder heads, in-house engine design, early elimination of the front tiller wheel. His tractors were painted black with gold letters, versus Holt's brown with yellow trim. His flagship, the Best Model A60, produced between 1919 and 1931, saw 18,948 units manufactured. That machine was later used to build Hoover Dam and to place the original Hollywood sign. Between 1900 and 1918, Holt and Best spent approximately $1.5 million in combined legal fees fighting patent and trademark lawsuits. Benjamin Holt held 47 patents. His nephew Pliny held 38. Daniel Best held 42. C.L. Best held 27. And then C.L. Best played his masterstroke. His lawyer traveled to Waterville, Maine, and purchased Alvin Lombard's 1901 and 1907 patents for $20,000. Since Lombard's patent predated Holt's critical 1907 filing by 6 years, Best was able to prove in court that Holt did not hold original priority on the crawler track concept. Holt retained only the Caterpillar trademark, forcing Best to call his machines track layers. This is where Lombard's fury comes into focus. The man who had invented a working tracked vehicle 3 years before Holt, who had been paid $60,000 for his patent rights only to see those rights ignored, now watched as his own patents were sold to Best for $20,000 and used as a legal weapon against the man who had cheated him. When Lombard told Montgomery he wanted to kill old Ben Holt, the rage was not theatrical. It was the accumulation of years of broken promises. The patent war was destroying both companies. By the early 1920s, bankers holding debt from both Holt and Best forced a resolution. Bondbroker Harry H. Fair of Pierce, Fair & Company in San Francisco, who had a board seat at Best, made secret overtures to Pliny Holt and Holt's vice president, Murray M. Baker, in Peoria. On April 15, 1925, Holt Manufacturing and C.L. Best Gas Traction merged to form the Caterpillar Tractor Company. It was technically a consolidation, not an acquisition. Both firms reorganized and combined financial ownership into a new entity. C.L. Best became chairman of the board and effectively ran the company until his death on September 22, 1951. Between 1926 and 1929, sales more than doubled while profits tripled. But by the time bankers were forcing the merger in California, the crawler track had already redrawn the map of 20th century warfare 6,000 miles away. In July of 1914, a mining engineer named Hugh F. Marriott wrote to Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Dunlop Swinton, describing an American Holt Caterpillar tractor he had witnessed on trial in Antwerp, Belgium. Marriott's assessment of the machine was blunt. He wrote that it climbed like hell. Swinton's moment of clarity came on October 19, 1914, while driving along the muddy roads from Saint-Omer to Calais in northern France, passing field hospitals and columns of wounded soldiers, horrified by the slaughter of infantry by machine guns across the muddy trenches of the Western Front. He connected Marriott's letter about the Holt tractor with the deadlock of trench warfare and proposed an armored machine gun destroyer to the British government. Lord Kitchener dismissed the idea. The official military response to the entire concept stated that if the writer of the paper would descend from the realms of fancy to the regions of hard fact, a great deal of valuable time and labor would be saved. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, thought differently. He sanctioned £70,000 in Admiralty funds and formed the Land Ships Committee in February of 1915. The committee's activities were concealed from Kitchener, the Admiralty Board, and the Treasury, all of whom were expected to block the project. A critical fact that rarely gets mentioned. Holt's tracks were actually tested for fighting vehicles and rejected. On February 17, 1915, a Holt tractor trial arranged for the War Office saw the Caterpillar bog down in mud. The War Office abandoned investigation. The Land Ships Committee then pursued its own track designs. The British Mark I tank that eventually emerged in 1916 used an entirely British-designed track system invented by Sir William Triton, not Holt or any American components. The Holt was the inspiration. The engineering was original, but Holt's real military contribution was not the tank. It was artillery hauling. The Holt 75, a four-cylinder machine producing 75 horsepower at 550 revolutions per minute and weighing roughly 24,000 pounds, became the workhorse of Allied artillery transport. Over 2,000 were deployed by the Allies, with an additional 442 built under license in England. The troops called them Cats. The larger Holt 120, producing 120 horsepower from a six-cylinder engine, saw only 698 total units built. Only one is believed to survive today, at the California Agriculture Museum. By the end of the war, the British War Office alone had received approximately 2,100 Holt tractors. Holt earned over $23 million in government contracts during 1917 and 1918. General Pershing, after using Holt 75s during the Pancho Villa expedition, nearly 500 miles south of the United States-Mexico border, wrote that the expedition into Mexico would have been impossible without the tractor and motor truck. What makes the military success all the more remarkable is that the American government initially wanted nothing to do with Holt's machines. Benjamin Holt wrote to the United States War Department in 1913 and again in 1914, offering free demonstrations. He was ignored both times. When grudging permission finally came for a 1915 test at Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois, Holt had to pay all expenses himself. The Army's initial order after that test was just 27 Caterpillars. The European armies recognized the crawler's value faster. In May of 1914, before the war even began, a Holt dealer in Hungary named Dr. Leo Steiner arranged a head-to-head test between a Holt tractor and an Austro-Daimler artillery tractor designed by a young engineer named Ferdinand Porsche. The Holt crossed 750 feet of semi-swamp terrain without difficulty. The Austro-Daimler bogged down after just 500 feet. The test forced Porsche to completely redesign his M17 Goliath tractor. It was a rare early defeat for the man who would later design the Volkswagen Beetle and the Tiger tank. On the Western Front, Holt tractors hauled some of the largest artillery pieces in the Allied arsenal: BL 6-inch howitzers, BL 60-pounder guns, and BL 9.2-inch howitzers. In Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, Holt tractors with tracked trailers hauled supplies across desert terrain that would have destroyed wheeled vehicles within hours. During the Battle of Caporetto in October of 1917, Holt 75s ferried supplies over steep Italian mountain roads in under 2 weeks, a feat that would have been impossible with horses. Like and subscribe if you want to see more forgotten stories from construction history. The French Schneider. A one-tank was built directly on a baby Holt 45 horsepower chassis. Chief designer Eugene Brilly ordered 2 Holts from England in January of 1915. France ordered 400 units at 56,000 French francs each. Germany's only production tank, the A75, used running gear copied directly from Holt tractors loaned by Austria-Hungary. Only 20 operational A7Vs were completed. The sole survivor, named Mephisto, is preserved at the Queensland Museum in Brisbane, Australia. And then there was Russia. In 1917, the entire country possessed just 165 tractors. After the revolution, Soviet factories in Leningrad and the Ural Mountains began producing crawler tractors modeled directly on the American Holt. By 1933, the massive Chelyabinsk tractor plant in the industrial heartland of the Urals was manufacturing the S-60 Stalinets, described as an exact copy of the Caterpillar 60. By the start of World War II, the Soviet Union had become the world's largest producer of crawler tractors. From 165 machines to global dominance in 2 decades, built on technology that traced directly to Benjamin Holt's redwood slats. Back in California, the crawler track was proving itself on a different kind of battlefield. The tracks themselves were evolving rapidly under the pressure of real-world construction. The original redwood slats of 1904 lasted only weeks before splintering under load. The transition from wooden to steel tracks happened gradually between 1906 and 1910, accelerated by the grueling conditions of the Los Angeles Aqueduct project. By World War I, all Holt and Best crawlers used steel link chain tracks with manganese alloy steel shoes, a material standard that persists in modified form to this day. The really significant undercarriage advance came in the 1940s, when Caterpillar introduced sealed and lubricated track systems. They were welded case and frame assemblies that kept abrasive dirt and sand out of the pin and bushing joints where most track wear occurs. For an operator working in sand or rock, that meant the difference between replacing undercarriage components every season and running for years. The bulldozer blade, the attachment that would define the crawler tractor in the public imagination, could not have existed without tracks. A wheeled tractor lacked the traction to push earth. The first commercially manufactured bulldozer blade was built by LaPlante Choate Manufacturing in the early 1920s and tested at the city of South Milwaukee garbage dump. The blade could not be lifted or lowered. It simply flipped up and dragged behind the machine when backing up. It earned a contract on the Dixie Highway in Kentucky in 1923, and within a decade, dozer blades were standard equipment on crawler tractors across the country. The Los Angeles Aqueduct, built between 1908 and 1913, was the first true proving ground for the crawler as a construction machine. 32 of the first 100 Holt Caterpillar tractors ever built went to work on that 233-mile, $23 million project, hauling pipe, cement, and equipment across the Mojave Desert and through Jawbone Canyon in scorching heat. Cost comparisons from project accounting records showed crawler tractors hauled materials at 20 cents per mile versus 40 to 80 cents per mile for horse and mule teams. That was a 50 to 75% cost reduction. The tractors hauled loads of up to 50 tons at speeds reaching 4 miles per hour over deep sand and grades of 10 to 30%. The Aqueduct project forced critical innovations. All steel construction became mandatory as wooden components failed in the desert heat. 3-speed transmissions replaced single-speed drives. Better spring suspension and improved clutches emerged from the constant punishment of rock and sand. The crawler tractor that came out the other end of that project was a fundamentally different machine from the one that went in. The crawler even made a brief and disastrous appearance in polar exploration. In 1910, Captain Robert Falcon Scott's Antarctic expedition brought 3 motor sledges with Caterpillar tracks, built by Wolseley Motors with 12 horsepower engines. While unloading at Cape Evans, one sledge broke through the sea ice and sank to the ocean floor as 20 men hauled on the ropes. The remaining 2 covered only 50 miles in 7 days before being abandoned in the Antarctic snow. At Hoover Dam, 12 Caterpillar 60 tractors helped move 3.7 million cubic yards of rock. At Grand Coulee Dam, there were 21 times as many Caterpillar machines as all other manufacturers' machines combined. At Fort Peck Dam, the same 21-to-1 ratio held. By the mid-1930s, 92% of all track-type tractors on major American construction jobs were Caterpillar. In 1910, America had 24 million horses and mules on farms, with 93 million acres of cropland, 27% of total harvested acres, devoted solely to growing their feed. By 1960, that population had collapsed to 2.5 million, freeing 89 million acres for other uses. The crawler track did not just change construction. It changed the landscape of American agriculture. Today, surviving machines from this era are scattered across a handful of museums. The Hagen Museum in Stockton, California, houses a restored 1918 Holt 75, within walking distance of Mormon Slough, where the first test took place. The Maine Forest and Logging Museum in Bradley holds a restored Lombard log hauler, brought back to working condition after a 30-year restoration completed in 2014. At the Tank Museum in Bovington, Dorset, a surviving Hornsby military machine stands as evidence of the invention Britain threw away and bought back. The oldest surviving Holt crawler is the 1908 25 horsepower, serial number 1004. Caterpillar itself carefully uses the word practical when describing Holt's contribution. They call it the first practical track-type tractor. That qualifier contains a century of prior failure, stolen patents, and forgotten genius. Alvin Lombard died in 1937. He never received full credit for his contribution. Mount Lombard in Antarctica was named for him. Of his 83 steam log haulers, only about 6 are known to survive. David Roberts died on April 22, 1928, having witnessed his own patent fuel, a global arms race he had declined to participate in. Fyodor Blinov, the freed serf who built differential steering crawler tracks in the 1880s, decades before anyone else, died in 1902 without ever finding a buyer. Benjamin Holt died on December 5, 1920, 5 years before the merger that created the company, bearing the name his photographer gave it. And Peter Holt, Benjamin's great-grandson, today runs Holt Cat of San Antonio, Texas, the largest Caterpillar dealership in the United States. He also owned the San Antonio Spurs. The wooden planks of 1904 are still paying dividends. Every bulldozer on every construction site, every crawler crane lifting steel into the skyline, every military tank rolling across a battlefield, all of them trace their commercial lineage to a Thanksgiving morning in the peat bogs outside Stockton, California, when a man who made wagon wheels bolted redwood slats to a chain and changed the world.